Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, whatever time you've got, and welcome to the latest edition of Free Thought Hour. Now, we've got Tercia, as usual, my co host, but she's a bit dim, I'm afraid. She's using homemade electricity. Hello, Tercia. Welcome.
Hello, John, and hello to our audience. Yes, I'm in a very windy Cape Town, but fortunately, we do have some backup electricity. So if I do look dim, I hope I'm not sounding dim. I hope I'm loud and clear from windy and load shed Cape Town.
Yes, yes. No, I didn't. I meant to sort of be a bit ambiguous when I
You were
said you were
trying,
dim.
you were trying to be punny.
Yes, yeah. But the truth is that you're dim in a light sense than any other sense at all whatsoever.
Well, let's see. Let's hope for the best. I have had some champagne and I've had wine and I've had a lovely supper. So I might be dimmer than usual.
Okay. Well, we're very jealous of your lifestyle at the moment. I'm on the juice, I'm afraid.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm now on water. So
yeah,
I had my hosts uh, uh, limit my intake because I wanted
yeah.
to be at least
Yes,
coherent
I
to
see.
talk
Okay.
to you and
Right.
our
Well,
guest, John Lombard.
you won't be marked on your coherence. Don't worry.
Thank you.
John, welcome from
Thank you very much.
Vancouver. How the devil are you?
Um, Devil aside, I'm doing very well.
Good, great. Well, the reason that we've got you as guest this week is partly because you approached me in my role as president of Atheism UK, as I have an email account with that name, and you applied to it, wrote me an email, and suggested that you have an event coming on that you would like us to help promote, and here we are having a go
John,
at doing just that.
Jr. So we have John Richards and John Lombard. So I think I will distinguish between JL and JR. John, it's quite unusual that people approach us. So maybe you should put your email out and maybe even mine. So people who are
Oh,
viewers who might want to contact us because we normally reach out to our guests, but it's
yes.
very nice when people reach out to us. So maybe I don't mind you putting my email address out there. You
Great.
know.
Okay, we'll certainly do that.
Yes.
It's not the first time. It has happened before, but it is quite rare compared to us going out with our fishing rod and trying to catch a guest. Yes. Anyway, John, the reason you're here, apart from the fact that you want to promote your event, which we'll do later, is because you've had such an amazing journey.
Yeah, I would say so. Certainly quite unique. Yes.
So we're going to start by asking you to tell us about that.
All right. Well, I'll try. Even the condensed version of this takes quite a while. I'll try to do the best I can. So, I'm Canadian. Was born in a tiny Canadian village of 900 people. Grew up there. My dad was an evangelical, charismatic, fundamentalist Christian preacher in the Anglican Church. Quite rare to have that type of preacher in the Anglican Church, but he was. So I grew up in a very, very strong, passionate Christian background. I grew up embracing that. By 16 years old, I was preaching from my dad's pulpit. At
Oh,
18, I went off to Bible college to study and prepare to be a missionary. And 1993, I was finished school already, and I went over to China. So this is just 4 years after the events in Tiananmen Square.
yeah, yeah.
China was still a very, very closed country, and I went over there to be a missionary, which was completely illegal. If
Oh,
not,
mm,
then I could be facing prison or at best kicked out of the country, at worst being imprisoned. Uh, for me, part of my motivation was actually I'd read all these missionary biographies, and all the missionaries that got written about as great men of God, got tortured, imprisoned, killed, things like martyred for their faith. So I felt that if I want to show what a good Christian was, I needed to go someplace. That was one of my main motivations. Because being a missionary was illegal, I also legally was working in a university.
That
So
is
teaching.
that's what I was alluding to. Completely amazing. So, first of all, I can't let this go. An evangelical preacher in the Anglican Church?
Evangelical fundamentalist charismatic in the Anglican Church, yes.
In the Anglican
Wow.
Church. That is amazing. John, you say that you went to China in 1993. How old were you in 1993?
26.
Okay. Did you have a death wish or something like that? Do you think you had?
Honestly, I had something of a martyrdom complex. Yes, I was, because of going, like, this kind of takes us to the next step. When I became an atheist, my questioning started in Bible college. When I went to Bible college, before Bible college, I knew exactly what I believed, but the why was because that's what my parents taught me. Bible college, when I started learning the why, reading through the whole Bible, learning about theology and Christian history and all those things, I started seeing an awful lot of problems, contradictions within the Bible, contradictions with, perceived reality. And so there were a lot of doubts for me. And going to China and kind of this martyrdom complex was partly that I was going to prove that despite all these doubts and questions, I was actually a good Christian willing to risk my life to spread the gospel. So
Wow.
I wouldn't say explicitly a death wish, but martyrdom was certainly a possibility, and that was a specific reason why I chose it, because that was a possibility. Yeah.
Wow. So it's following Jesus' example.
Yep. Well, and actually, not so much following Jesus' example. It's following the example of all the missionaries I read about, because pretty much in order to get a book written about you as a missionary, you have to be martyred.
Oh.
John, I want to pick up on something that you, besides the whole thing of a persecution complex, because, I mean, you can't really be a proper good Christian if you are not suffering for your faith. Even if you have to fabricate something to be suffering about, so that's the one thing. But the second thing that you mentioned there is that you started doubting once you went to Bible college. And it's so interesting that you say that, because I grew up in a devout, fundamentalist, very non-charismatic, but Calvinist congregation. And I can definitely identify, I used to feel guilty because I wasn't persecuted enough for my faith. But the shortest answer I can give when somebody asks me what led to your deconversion, the shortest answer is I studied the Bible. And I want to ask you, I don't know, John, you have to stop me both of you, but I want to lead straight into the Clergy Project. That's the reason that you made contact with John Richards in the first place. But I have known a great many ministers in my life. I used to study at a university that had a massive seminary, and I know many ministers my age and my parents' age. And something that strikes me about all of them is many of them suffer from severe depression. And I know at least two who committed suicide. And to me, that indicates that maybe they had doubts, or those who didn't commit suicide, maybe one of the reasons for their depression is that they have to constantly battle the doubts that going to seminary raised in their brains, because they're not stupid. I mean, I'm sorry, I interrupted you while you were still telling us about persecuted in China.
I'd like to get to how John became deconstructed.
Actually, I can kind of address both there. So, like I said, in Bible college, I started having doubts. But at that time, it wasn't doubting Christianity. At that time, was more doubting myself. Like, there's all these problems, but it's not because the Bible's wrong, or it's because I don't have enough understanding. I don't have enough knowledge. I need the Holy Spirit. So I figured I need to study more, learn more, pray more. So I did that. And just as I did that, particularly the learning and studying more thing, instead of the problems getting smaller and smaller, I just kept finding bigger and bigger ones. But the biggest issue for me, actually, that kind of was the turning point, wasn't so much all those doubts about the Bible. It was like in Canada, I was always surrounded by Christians. My only contact with non-Christians was evangelizing. And that was it.
That raises another issue that I want to probe into. You were in your own little Christian community and hardly ever saw these weird things called atheists. So what was your attitude towards them then? What did you think they were like?
Oh, I would like, absolutely. To me, atheists were, basically whatever all the Christians call me now. No morality, absolutely hopeless. Depressing, terrible lives, no joy. Any evil servants of Satan. So kind of going to Tertia's question. I know a lot of religious people, when they become atheists, it's really an act of like there's a lot of negative emotion, anger, betrayal. For me, it was the dead opposite. This was not a process of becoming angered, disillusioned, anything like that. It was the dead opposite. I absolutely did not want to deconvert as such. My entire life, my identity, everything was tied up in that. For me to reject that all meant effectively alienating my family, alienating or losing most of my friends, throwing myself out into an entirely new, entirely different world that I had no concept of, no experience with. And it was one of the most difficult struggles I've had in my life.
I imagine it would be like me or Tertius suddenly moving to China.
Yeah. But like I was saying, one of the major factors for me in going to China was I was no longer surrounded by Christians. I was suddenly, I was in a school with foreign teachers, with Chinese students, meeting people, talking to people, and as I met people from other religions, I started realizing like all the things that I use as proofs of my belief. Answered prayers are proof of my belief. Well, a Muslim talks about answered prayer. A Hindu talks about answered prayer. And my answered prayer are proof of my belief, but your answered prayers are not. A miracle, Christian miracle, proof of my beliefs. Muslim miracle, Hindu miracle, whatever. No, not a proof of your beliefs. And it 100%. There was no logic to it. It was purely hypocritical. And that was the thing that really got me. That starting to recognize that, like, putting the theological questions aside, which were just every argument that I used to justify my belief were arguments that every other religion used as well. And how could I say mine was a proof and theirs wasn't?
John, I want to ask you about China. So my sister-in-law is actually Chinese, so I'm quite familiar with the Chinese way of life, because I mean I'm in my family I have the Chinese people, and what I found when I was 18, I went to Greece for a year as an au pair. So I also left my normal safe community, and although Greece is nominally a Christian country, it's a very different type of Christianity. And just the culture shock of being a Westerner in China, or being an Afrikaans girl from rural South Africa in Athens, in itself, it sort of shakes one's cage. But I want to ask you whether what I found having interaction with Chinese people is that even though most Chinese are non-religious, I found that there's quite a bit of superstition. And when my brother married his wife, he actually married her in secret. He didn't tell us that he was going to get married to a Chinese girl because he knew that my parents wouldn't like the idea of him being married to somebody who was not a Christian. It wasn't that she was not a Westerner, it was that she was not a Christian. But then he told us that he tried to convert her because at that stage Christianity was still important to him. And then he bought a series of CDs about the Bible. So I mean, she grew up atheist, but there's a very strong superstition element in the Chinese culture that I've been exposed to, at least. And my brother says the same. And when he showed his Chinese wife these stories, these biblical stories, she was sort of, what the hell? What is this all about? And for him to see those very familiar stories through her eyes, suddenly made him see it in a different way. There's two things I want to ask you about this. So I want to say that it's when you're a Christian, you see those beliefs as superstitious. So things like you don't open both doors at opposite end of a house because then your luck will be blown away by the wind, and you don't sleep if you go. We were touring in England, and my sister-in-law wouldn't sleep in a hotel that was within a certain distance of a graveyard because it's unlucky. And, when I was a Christian, I would say, come on, that's just superstition. But then you start to examine some of your own beliefs and you say, okay, so what's the difference between what I call superstition and what those people believe? Did you have those experiences in China? Were you in rural China? I mean, China is such a foreign and interesting place to us Westerners. So can you speak to that a little bit for us?
Okay, yeah, well, I should, particularly for listeners, I should add here, I ended up staying in China for 25 years. My first 5 years, were as a Christian. The last 20 were as a secular humanist.
Do you speak
Mandarin?
Do you speak Mandarin?
Oh, yeah, fluently.
Wow, that's amazing. Anyhow.
Anyhow.
That's my Mandarin.
Yeah. So and those 20 years as a secular humanist, I mostly worked as a cross-cultural consultant. So like I'm really one of the top experts on China, on doing business. Like there's very, very few Westerners who've been in China as long as I was. We're a very small group. And I specialize specifically in cultural issues. Yes, they're definitely, China has more atheists than any other country in the world. Very, very secular for the most part. One thing I always like to emphasize, in the West, one of the atheist paradigms I hear all the time is that atheists are more rational, atheists are more critical thinkers. That's why they're atheists. No, that's one reason. But in China, you've got the majority of the population are atheists, and there's nothing rational about it. They're atheists because from grade 1 through to whenever, they are taught, proselytized, propagandized that atheism is right, all religions are wrong. There is no rational reason given for it. They are simply told it is wrong, you do not believe it. And when you look at the statistics in China, religions are like, I also hear like if a kid is raised as an atheist, then he'll be an atheist when he's an adult. Again, that's not true in China. Huge numbers of Chinese as adults are converting to religion because they've never been taught to think critically. They've been taught to believe things because this is what an authority figure said. So when they become an adult and some charismatic, interesting person comes along and tells them about Christianity or Buddhism or whatever it is, it sounds good and they have no critical thinking to be able to analyze that.
Yeah, they've just been taught what to think, not how to think.
Exactly. I've spoken at conferences on this, kind of like it's a pet issue for me. The misperception, like we tend to take our small group of atheists in Western culture, most of whom have come through or been exposed to a Christian background, rejected it for rational reasons. We tend to think that is atheism, and no, the vast majority. Like if you look at China, there are more more atheists in China than there are in North America and Europe combined. You know, yeah, and they represent the majority of atheist population on the planet. They are not rational. It is not for most of
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
not
yeah.
for rational reasons.
They have all these weird Chinese medicines, which shows that they're not very critical in their application of.
Atheists, you know, I have tons of, most of my Chinese friends are atheists. They will still, you know, if they're having trouble getting married, they'll still go to the temple and make offerings because, well, I don't really believe it'll work, but it doesn't hurt to try.
Yes.
My wife, when her grandmother died, they had the funeral. She and her family, all of whom again are atheists, went to the cemetery carrying a chicken with them, slit the chicken's throat, walked around it, putting blood on the ground, doing all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
My wife to this day will not sleep in a room that has a mirror exposed because ghosts can come through the mirror. You know, yeah, there's tons of these things, and it's really because the education system is the complete opposite of teaching critical thinking. It's 100% obey authority. You know, what authority says is what's true.
So you must have been China-fied for 25 years. Was it a culture shock coming back to Vancouver?
Yes, very much so. Particularly in terms of, I wouldn't say so much in terms of my personal experience. Like there were small things like, you know, a huge number of variety stores here have Asians working there. I would walk in, buy something, and without even thinking, because they're Asian, I just start speaking Mandarin.
Yes.
And a lot of them, maybe they're Chinese, but they've never learned Mandarin. Maybe they're Korean. You know, they just look at me like, "What are you doing?"
Yes.
You know, it's just automatic for me. Asian face, Chinese.
Yeah.
But beyond that, the bigger issue was living in China for 20. Like I went there straight out of university. I never owned property in Canada. I had no bank account in Canada. I had no, my driver's license expired. I had no driver's license, no job. When I came back, I had no credit history. I couldn't get a credit. I was in a worse situation than having bad credit. I had
almost as bad as a pastor or priest who's left the religion.
Well, no, actually, pretty much a lot of it was what immigrants go through. You know, getting credit, buying a car. I had to pay cash for my car. I couldn't get a loan to pay the car. Driver's license. You know, I had to retest again and almost had to go through the process of getting learners and everything like that. But at the last minute, they kind of took mercy on me and gave me a regular driver's license. But like,
John,
I had to restart everything from scratch.
I want to still ask, whereabouts in China were you? Were you in Beijing, or because I know China's a big country?
Yeah, I lived in 4 cities. First city was Qingdao. Most people, if they may be familiar with Tsingtao beer, which is the most popular Chinese exported beer. That's from Qingdao. Beautiful oceanside city. That's where during the 2008 Olympics, that's where all the the boating events were held. Then I had 1 year in Shanghai. I had 10 years in Beijing and 8 years in another city called Dongguan, which is down near Hong Kong. I started a nonprofit organization in Lijiang, which is in Western China, in the foothills of the Himalayas. My wife is from Chengdu, which is in Sichuan, again in Western China, and I've traveled extensively all over the country.
Wow. My sister-in-law is from Guangzhou.
So, that's an hour from Dongguan, my last place.
I recognize that it sounded about right. Wow, that is such an amazingly interesting story.
It is a journey.
And your so I want to get back to the Clergy Project. Because that's one of the main reasons we're having you on. So I want to ask you firstly, do you know whether there's a chapter of the Clergy Project active in South Africa? Because I'm convinced that there's a lot of South African pastors who have to stand on a pulpit every Sunday and have to preach, and it just wrecks them. In fact, I have this hypothesis that I've had even as a dedicated Christian. When I discovered that, pastors don't always tell the truth about what they learned, especially in a Calvinist, the congregation that or the branch of Christianity that I grew up in, there's a very strong emphasis on the Bible and knowing the Bible and having a rigorous academic training in the Bible and biblical scholarship. And what I discovered that ministers are taught that the story of Moses is probably not true. Genesis is not real. It's allegory, it's mythology. But they preach it from the pulpit every Sunday as if it's real historical events. And that made me, I often say that I think there's two kinds of pastors or ministers. Those who are just, they don't really care about what they do. They just do it, and they're actually lazy, and they're just happy to say what they have to so that they can get a nice salary at the end of each month, and they don't really care. And then you get those who actually know that they are not being honest, and many of them suffer for it. They feel guilty about it, and they really take the job that they do seriously. So you having, I don't know what your position in the Clergy Project is, and I do know that the Clergy Project is quite secretive to protect members, because if a congregation knows that their pastor is a non-believer, a closet non-believer, I mean, in my country, he'll be gone so quickly. And we're talking about people's livelihoods. So I want to ask you about that, to tell us about that and how you got involved. And I don't know, could a person like me find out or introduce ministers and say, look, there is this thing called the Clergy Project. I don't know how many people know about it in South Africa. So what is your status?
Yeah, well, I think I should explain for everybody more specifically about the Clergy Project and what it is. The name is becoming more and more confusing when it was started. It was an organization specifically for North American religious leaders, clergy, Christian leaders who lost their faith and became atheists. As the organization has grown, our vision has grown significantly. So it's now no longer just North American, it's international. And it's no longer just for Christians. We have ex-religious leaders from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Wiccans, you name it, Mormons, JWs, you name it, we've probably got it in our group. The number one qualification to get into the group is you have to have been in a position of religious leadership, which usually means this is your main job. This is your living.
Right. Can I just interrupt you there? Because I want to know, do you ever get them before they've left their religion, while they're still pretending and still practicing as if they're still...
Here's the thing. For us, we do not take anybody who has not been in a position of religious leadership.
Yeah.
And we do not take anybody who is not at the point of saying, I am an atheist, I have rejected. If they have doubts, if they're questioning, we don't take them. We'll point them to an organization like Freedom from Religion, something like this, but we won't take them. You have to have been a religious leader, either in the past or currently, and you have to be an atheist. Not questioning, not going through the process, but you've already finished that. Now, saying that, I'd say about probably 25% to around 25% of our members are still actively in the pulpit or in position of 75 are out, 25% are in. And we tend to get a lot of criticism on the Christian side because we're perceived as like we're trying to infiltrate churches and put atheists in there so that we can subvert the churches and things like that. And it's actually the dead opposite.
Yeah.
As Tercy has said, if you're in a position of consider your typical Christian pastor, their education, let's say they're 40, 45 years old. Their education is a purely theological education.
Yeah.
Their work experience is entirely in the church.
Yeah.
Their house is provided to them by the church.
Yeah. Mm,
Their family is a Christian Bible believing family.
mm,
The moment the church finds out that they are an atheist, they have lost their job, they've lost their home, their prospect of getting a new job is extremely difficult.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like for your average religious person, losing your faith can be a traumatic, difficult process. But for
Mm,
religious leaders, it can be far worse. Then we are
mm,
talking about people in countries where Hinduism or Islam is the main culture. They're looking at potentially being murdered for rejecting their beliefs. You know,
yes.
so we
John,
are active. We're not trying to get atheists into the churches.
No.
We are actively doing everything we can to try to help them to get
Yeah.
out. Um,
Yeah.
we provide job training. We provide help with getting their resume done. Counseling, psychological counseling is a huge part of this. They suffer from tremendous depression,
Mm,
alcoholism, drug
mm,
abuse because of this conflict they're
yeah.
having between having to
Yeah.
preach something that they don't believe and feeling trapped and unable to
Yeah.
escape.
Yeah.
To me, I think churches or religions should welcome us because we are doing our best to get the atheists out of there
Yes.
so that
Yes.
they don't have to worry about them.
Mm,
Like
mm,
let us get rid of your
yeah.
atheists for you.
John, I can just tell you that last week the main news in one of the big Afrikaans newspapers was of a theological professor. So he's still a professing Christian, but
Mhm.
he wrote 2 years ago. He wrote an academic paper. So he's a lecturer at one of the seminaries near me, in fact, in Stellenbosch University. And two
Mhm.
years he wrote an academic article that was published in an academic journal. And the gist of the content of this article was that he's not convinced that Jesus Christ was divine. And
Ooh.
somebody now, 2 years later, 2 years down the line, so it's the Dutch Reformed Church, the biggest Afrikaans congregation in South Africa. They
Mm,
actually um, they reprimanded him. So I mean, this is a formal reprimand. He's not allowed to preach. He has been placed under. So I'm trying to translate here as I go. Some disciplinary process, and he's not even an atheist. He's a
yeah.
professing Christian who just wrote something that strays from the church doctrine, and he is getting so much flack for that,
Mm,
that his job is in jeopardy. Uh, and so it's not even as if these people in that position, they don't even have to be atheists. They get tremendous pressure
Yeah,
um, if they and no support.
yeah.
They literally lose
Mm,
everything.
yeah,
So
yeah. So I'd actually like to address the other part of the question you asked about my role and about do we have a chapter in South Africa or anything. So I'm not just a member of TCP. I am on the board of directors, and my role actually specifically is international outreach. Right now, we have members in other countries around the world, but no formal leadership chapters, anything like that. Everything is from North America. So those resources I talked about, helping people with job training, psychological counseling, things like that, those are pretty much only available to people in North America. If you're
ah,
somewhere else, you don't have it. And like if you're an atheist who's an ex-Muslim leader, and you're in a Muslim country, the type of support that you need is very, very different from
yeah.
what we can provide.
Mm,
So we are very, very, like, one of my main things is actually trying to get chapters started in other countries, other regions in the world. The thing is, we need to have enough people who A, fit the qualifications, and B, are willing to put together, like, we have enough people to put together a leadership team that will actually work on getting a chapter going there, and then building a community, getting the word out where they are. I also want to quickly address, you mentioned, you used the word secretive before, that we're a very secretive organization, and I tried to get away from that description. we're a very public organization in terms of, we want people to know about us. We want people to know what we do, what we stand for. Um, a great number of our members are publicly out. There's no secret about it. They're very public atheists like myself. Um, but we do have within the group, when people join, they have the option of joining anonymously, that only the person that does their intake knows who they actually are. They will not use their real name. So this provides, and even if within the group they say who they are, we everybody knows we will not say anything about them. We will not out them publicly unless they say that they're publicly out. So it's a place that they can go and be an atheist, talk about what they're going through without any fear that they're going to be outed and revealed in their church. But I'd say it's a minority of our members who are in that situation.
Yes, but I think it needs to be emphasized that there are definitely cases where somebody needs to know that they won't be outed before they are ready, because if they are outed on terms that could be in some cases physically a danger to their staying alive or to their livelihoods, and the repercussions for families and for children and spouses can be really really bad. So I think it's important that it should be, I don't think anybody wants to keep it a secret, but there's a right time and there's a not the right time. And I've quite well insofar as I follow the organization, and I know that there have been attempts by Christian church members to, I don't want to use the word infiltrate because it sounds very cloak and daggerish, but there have been attempts by Christians to see if they can get access to the organization, to see if maybe my pastor is a member. But I just also want to say, John, don't go at the end of the show, because I'm familiar and friendly with former pastors who might be able to start something in South Africa. So get my details at the end of the show. We'll do that in private. But because I know a number of pastors who, one of them is a winemaker in South Africa. In fact,
he's gone from selling holy water to Bacchus.
Absolutely.
Well, no, his advantage is he can just get a whole bunch of water and transform it to wine.
Yes. I wanted to say that it's a bit different in the UK, where we're not likely to murder any ex-pastors, but they do suffer. We had one, it was about, I suppose, getting on for 40 years ago now, in my county, just down the road at Chichester, who declared that God is just the sum total of all of our feelings and ideas of goodness towards each other. And he was drummed out of the Brownies. He was labeled a heretic and carted off. He's no longer working in that field.
Yeah, in my country, and I have to say that I'm from the Afrikaans community. So in the community that I'm from, if just being an atheist is already frowned upon, never mind being a pastor or a minister who's an atheist. I mean, we won't be killed. Our lives are not in danger, but the amount of social price, the social price that you pay is high, and that's for me as a non-clergy person. So it's I don't think people realize how dramatic and traumatic deconversion can be if you've built your entire life around the church, and I really mean your entire life, and you realize I don't believe this anymore.
It seems that
completely shattering.
being in China when you deconverted might have made it a little bit easier because you were already separated from your culture, your family, your society in somewhere strange. So did you feel any loss of family and friends, or were you already?
Well, yeah, actually, I've had some Christians have argued that I became an atheist because I went to China, which was an atheist country. I was living with atheists. That's not true, but I would say if I'd stayed in Canada, I think I still would have eventually deconverted, but probably would have taken longer. Being in China, the fact that I had a lot of friends who were not Christian. By the time I'd been in China for 5 years, most of my friends were Chinese. Most of them were not Christian. So that was easier. I didn't have to worry about losing my job because my job was teaching in university.
Yes.
So even with leaders, so there were some things that happened with other religious leaders that I didn't have to face so much that made it easier. I would say the most difficult aspect, and this would most not of deconverting, but after I did, my family weren't happy about it, but there was no rejection. Like it was more like the news of hearing that your beloved son has got terminal cancer. That kind of that rather than anger or rejection or anything like that.
Yeah, pity.
Friends, pretty much all my Christian friends were gone. A few we stayed in touch, all of whom were more on the liberal side. But pretty much I started over. But for me, the most difficult thing was, remember, I went there as an evangelist and church planter. So I had, in my 5 years, I had converted people to Christianity. I'd helped start underground churches, which were illegal.
Yeah.
So when for Chinese, becoming a Christian, particularly at that time, it wasn't just a question of do I believe or not believe. By believing, they were literally putting their freedom and potentially their lives in danger. And what my standard response to them was, you may lose your job. You may be imprisoned or tortured. You may lose your life. But that's temporary compared to the reward of an eternity in paradise. And when I lost my faith, when I became an atheist, and I had to go back to those people and effectively tell them what I told you is a load of bullshit, and you have risked your lives, your freedom for nothing. It was extremely difficult and painful for me. To this day, I still feel a tremendous sense of guilt and pain over it. The reaction from them was a combination of anger, betrayal. These were people who'd been some of my closest friends in China, and had trusted me to a ludicrous degree. That part was very, very difficult.
Did you feel any anger towards the people who got you into it way back in your childhood days?
No, not really. They did what they believed. It's
John, I was going to ask you whether you felt any guilt, but you've answered my question, because my father wasn't even a minister. He was a school principal, but in his heart, he was actually a missionary and a minister. And he deconverted at the age of 65. And he has told me that he still feels guilty towards the young people that he led to Christ. And it's not even as if he endangered their lives. Did you physically did you tell those people, listen, I've changed my mind? And what was their response in general? Did they say, because are many of them still Christians? Did they hold fast to the faith that you planted in them? What was their response?
Yeah, well, first, I didn't talk to all of them. I did talk with a few. Like I said, these were some of my closest friends. They were people that I felt a great sense of responsibility to. I was in a position of leadership, ministering to them, helping them, everything like that. So I did talk with them, a few of them. Told them, I didn't say it like the way I just said, it's all bullshit. You risked it, but I told them I no longer believed. Told them a few of the reasons why. they told everybody else, and then effectively I was informed I was persona non grata. Yeah, all communication was ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically just lost contact with them. I left. I also left Qingdao shortly after that. That's when I moved to Shanghai. So pretty much it was just shut off, and that was the end
Yeah.
of my
Yeah.
contact with
Yeah. Separated by location. So how did you actually get into the Clergy Project then? That must have happened when you got back into Vancouver or somewhere?
No. It was while I was still in China because I only came back to
Really?
Vancouver
Oh,
3 years ago. No, basically, when I went through the process of deconverting, becoming a secular humanist, my feeling at that time was I was an aberration. Um, you just
yeah.
never ever heard. You heard
No.
about Christians who lose their faith, but religious leaders, missionaries
Mm,
who lose their faith, you just never ever heard about it. It just
mm.
didn't happen. And I thought I was like on the extreme edge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it would have been, I think, around 2014.
Yeah.
I found out about the Clergy Project a few years after they'd started. And it was such a revelation to me when I joined. At that time, I think they had around 700 members. We're now over 1,200.
Mm.
Yeah, it was such a revelation to find other people that
Yeah. Yeah.
had missionaries, preachers. We have people who've been preachers in mega churches,
Yeah.
who famous musicians, people who've
Mm,
been in major, very public
mm,
positions of leadership were in our group.
mm.
And discovering that I wasn't some outlier, wasn't
Yeah.
that there was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
community of people just like me
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
understood me and what I'd gone through. It was
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm
and
not weird
fortunately,
after all.
yeah, and fortunately, I was already through all the trauma. I built my new life. I was happy in my new life,
Yeah.
so I was able to come in a role to help and support those who are going through that now.
Mm, mm. It's a bit like the Pope resigning. Oh, wait a minute, that happened. I
Yes, but
wondered
he
at the
didn't resign.
time.
He didn't
I,
resign because he didn't believe any longer.
well, I don't. Do we know? Do we? I think there are a lot of
True.
suspicious people like me who suspected that he might have. He wouldn't declare it, but he might have
No.
seen the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. So, John, did you? I think you're one of the lucky ones. How traumatized are some of your members? Do you find that
Oh,
they?
very. We have like first we do have two groups. We have the ones that are still in their positions of leadership and the ones that have gotten out.
Going
Among
through the motions.
among the ones who are still in, I'd say there might be the rare exception, but the vast majority suffer from, like I said, severe depression,
PTSD.
alcoholism, drug abuse,
Mm,
all sorts of issues like this.
yeah.
It's very difficult, very traumatic. The ones who are out, a lot of them, that journey out was also very tricky, like the condemnation from the people that formerly were their
Yeah.
friends, their congregations. They receive threats. They're treated like garbage.
Yeah.
So a lot of them,
All of which, of course, is
besides that trauma, they also feel a great deal of anger.
yeah. Yeah.
There's all that. I,
I'd,
I'm
I'd like
like
to
I know that
point
the
out.
anti. Sorry, go ahead, John.
I'd like to point out here that all of that rejection behavior is not exactly very Christian, is it?
Yeah, well, it depends again which Bible verses you look at.
Of course.
There are Bible verses about stoning your children to death for being rebellious. So what about a religious leader? Yes.
Silly me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, are there any statistics available about the ages of your members?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Not that you, because I'd be interested actually to know how many, are they towards the ends of their careers or are they younger? Because my experience.
We have the full range. I couldn't give you a statistic,
Okay.
but yeah, we have the full range.
Okay.
Would you like to get to promote the event now, which you're?
Well, I would love to.
Yeah, here we go. I put the title of it up there. But you want to tell me a bit more about, because it's a hybrid, isn't it? It's in
Yeah.
real life and online.
Yeah.
And
So
you want to tell me
one of
the location for the real life bit and the URL, or the virtual location where people can join from wherever.
yeah. So I wear quite a few different hats. One, like I said, is on the board of directors of the Clergy Project. The end of 2022, I also took a position as the director for the Vancouver chapter of the Center for Inquiry, which promotes critical thinking, science-based decision-making, humanist values, things like this. So our first big event after me taking over is this event when religious leaders turn atheist. I'm actually taking my position in both CFI and TCP to bring them together. So we have a panel of Clergy Project members.
Yep.
We have 3 who are Christian, ex-Christian, 1 ex-Muslim, 1 ex-Jew. So we've got a range of different religions. And going to be moderated by Dan Barker, the head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
I'm a big fan of Dan's.
Me too. I loved his book. His book was instrumental in my own deconversion.
Yeah. So basically, it'll just be a panel discussion, 2 hours, talking about the religious background, kind of like some of the story I've shared, their process of deconverting, what problems, challenges, difficulties they face, and their lives today, what they're like today, how their life is today. It is hybrid, so in Vancouver at UBC Robson Square, we'll be having it live in a room there, but it will be streamed live on Zoom as well, so people from all over the world can join in live. There'll be the first part is going to be just panel with Dan handling it. Second part will be Q&A, including taking questions from the Zoom viewers. So it is fully interactive, even if you're coming on that. And I know different parts of the world, time zones make it very difficult. It will be recorded and available online when it's finished if people want to watch it.
So say the name of that square again, where the UVC.
It's UBC Robson Square. ROBSON.
ROBSON Square.
Yeah.
And what's can you publicize the link if anybody would like to? So if I suffer from insomnia, so if I'm awake at 3 o'clock, can I tune in?
I would say the easiest thing is just go to centerforinquiry.ca. But that's CEN. It's the British spelling of center, Canadian spelling, CENTRE for inquiry.ca.
Is it? That's I inquiry, not E inquiry, isn't it?
Yeah, I inquiry. Yes.
Okay, I'm definitely going to do that. I love the work that the CFI does. I myself am a massive proponent. Sorry, I'm laughing because my husband's laughing at me last door on the other side. He's distracting me. I'm a massive proponent of critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
And
so what was the ending of that URL?
.ca.
.ca.
For Canada.
Yep. And what is the timing of this? What is?
Yes, it will be 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock Pacific time.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Oh, sorry. And it's not UVC, it's UBC. B is in Bob.
Oh, yeah, British Columbia. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll alter that then.
I prefer the term secular humanist to atheist.
Oh, me very much so. Yeah.
Because I mean, I have no problem identifying as an atheist, but in my country at least, it's better to be a communist than an atheist.
Yeah.
Communists at least have some chance. You can be religious and be a communist, but to be an atheist, I mean, you're just going straight to hell. But I'm fascinated by the role that clergy plays in converting people, while they know, in many cases, in the more formal structured church, like I'm not sure about the Anglican church, but I know in the Calvinist churches, like the one that I grew up in, as I said, you have to study a 4-year baccalaureate degree, and then you have a 3-year theological degree. So it's 7 years of study, and they know they learn Hebrew, they learn Greek, and they know that the things we learn in the Bible is often taught to them by non-religious professors who are biblical scholars, and it's as if they are taught one thing and they have to teach a different thing. They are taught that the Exodus is probably a myth, but then they go into the pulpit every Sunday and they preach it to people like me who don't have that knowledge as if it's the truth. And even many pastors, when I discovered that, because I never knew that, I just accepted when my pastors presented the message to me as the gospel truth, that it was the gospel truth. And once the internet was opened up, to me at least, in my 40s, I realized that there are other sources, and I started to explore them. And then I actually made an appointment with my minister, and I said, do you learn this in seminary? I've done some reading. Is this what you learn when you study theology at the university that I went to myself? And he said, yeah, no, they do. And I was completely shocked. I said, so why don't you teach us that when we sit in your congregation every Sunday? And he had no answer. And that was one of the events in my personal deconversion, and in that of my mom and my dad as well. And they were in their 60s when they deconverted. So, I think we need to get the Clergy Project active in South Africa. That's for sure. I know a few clergymen. So
well, honestly, not just in South Africa. Like if we could get people starting in South Africa and use that as a center to kind of, because we actually have a number of African members from different areas of Africa. The problem is they're all isolated. They're not in a position to be able to start up a full chapter themselves. So if we could get one base started in Africa and then refer those others to that, it'd be great. They have access to something that's much closer, that has a much better understanding of their situation than us here in North America.
Well, I'm in contact with atheist and humanist groups in countries like Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, the Congo, various other countries. So I expect they know some clergymen who are in the closet and daren't come out. So I'll put out a message.
I want to get your details, John, at the end of our broadcast, which is nearing the end. But we can actually get John Lombard on again, because China is such an dear, I just ruined my brother-in-law's office. I kicked some.
That gravity stuff, eh? Yeah. Well, you're right. You're right, Tercy. We are almost at the end. Normally now I would give you an announcement of who's going to be our guest next week. But it's uncertain at the moment, because last week we had Ronald Cram, who came to us to tell us what the scientific evidence for God was. And we weren't receptive to him sufficiently, I'm afraid.
I was nasty. I was being very mean.
Well, we didn't let him explain what this evidence is. And so he's interested to come back. But since then, I've been putting some little 2-minute educational clips on the channel, Free Thought channel that you're watching now. And it challenges his claim that there is scientific evidence for God. So we've been in messenger chat about this, and I've offered him the chance to come to the show next week and finish what he never completed last week, largely due to our rudeness. And
mine. I'll take full responsibility, John.
I don't know whether he's going to accept or not, bearing in mind that I've already shown him why he's wrong. So we'll wait and see. If he doesn't come back, maybe Tercia and I will do, I don't know, some sort of a lesson, because I've got all these little videos that we could showcase.
Well, we could dissect last week's program if John, yeah, we could do that. And I'll try not to be a bull in a china shop and destroy wherever I'm working broadcast
Well,
as I did just now.
As I explained probably before we started transmitting here, I've got no desire to publicly humiliate these people. You know, I'm a teacher. You don't do that to your children, your pupils. You don't humiliate them. That's not the way forward. So I don't want to do that. I just want to help him see the light or the dark.
Well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But John, we wish you all the best. I've jotted the date, the 27th of January, 28th, sorry.
28th. Yeah.
January 28th, 2 to 5 Pacific, PST, Pacific
Standard.
Pacific Standard Time.
Pacific Standard Time. And I'm going to definitely try and log in and see if I can join your broadcast via Zoom. Definitely. So I will visit the website of the Center for Inquiry. It's a Center, CNTRE, for Inquiry with I.ca. And it was lovely to meet you, John. And I'd love to have you back on just to talk about China and your experiences living in China for 25 years.
I would like to add one more note here for particularly for females. If you look at this, it's probably going to stand out that it's all men. And I've already gotten some pushback from people about, diversity issues. Why don't we have women? So I just want to, for everybody listening right now, I want to emphasize, I did my absolute best to get women on the panel. The main problem is the misogyny of religion. Because religions are so misogynistic, very few women are in positions of religious leadership to begin with. So our female membership, we do have female members, but it's fairly small. Not because we don't want them, but because just there aren't a lot. The number of female leaders is much religious leaders is much smaller. And the ones we do have, unfortunately, we're not able to make it. Several of them probably will be there by Zoom. So we're going to try to give them a chance to speak as well. But just please be aware, this is not a man's
policy.
We really did try our best to get a female voice on.
Yeah, if the religions don't take women in at the beginning of the sausage machine, then there's not going to be many of them trying to escape at the other end, is there?
Well, I might be shocking my two male friends, but the church that I used to belong to, which is the Reformed Church, so it's a very Calvinist church, and as we speak, in 2022, no women are allowed to be ministers in that church.
There you go.
So there we go.
The advantage is few of them will be suffering from the problems that need the Clergy Project to save them from. Guys, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the show now because it's supposed to be only 1 hour. I'm going to play the outro and stop the live streaming, and we can stay behind and chat without an audience. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.